Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference. My name is Leanne Greenlee, and I'm with the Division of Materials and Waste Management here at Ohio EPA, and we'll be moderating the Breaking It Down, the Regulations of Composting in Ohio session. Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference has 24 sessions over 2 weeks. Today, this is the second session focusing on programs within the Division of Materials and Waste Management, and we will have a third session this afternoon. Registration information and a conference agenda are located on Ohio EPA's conference webpage. We hope you are able to join us for additional conference sessions. Please remember, it's never too late to sign up for the next conference session, and all sessions are being recorded for you to view later. Before we get started, we would like to point your attention to one of today's environmental fun facts. Did you know Ohio EPA's Beneficial Use Program promotes the diversion of waste from landfill disposal in a manner that is protective to public health, safety, and the environment? Common beneficial uses include land application for ergonomic benefit, soil blending, and structural fill. Materials currently covered by beneficial use rules include foundry sands, drinking water treatment materials, dredged materials from federal navigational channels, sewage sludge, incinerator ash, and waste materials burned for energy recovery. You can scan the QR code on the screen with your smartphone to get more information about the beneficial use program. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our presenter, Angel Arroyo-Rodriguez, in our Division of Materials and Waste Management here in Columbus. Dr. Arroyo-Rodriguez is an environmental planner with over 20 years of experience in the public and academic sectors, focusing on sustainable management for organic waste materials. He currently leads the composting and infectious waste regulatory programs for DMWM, which is short for Division of Materials and Waste Management. We also have subject matter experts, Tony Blevins and Kristen Tilson, behind the scenes today to help answer questions. And with that, Angel?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning to learn about how and when composting activities are regulated in Ohio. Because of time constraints, we will not be covering the regulations in detail. My main goal is to give you the information you need to determine when a composting activity might be regulated by Ohio EPA, and if so, what are the general steps required to establish a facility, and what are the general compliance expectations. I will also cover where you can find this additional information. So let's start by setting the big picture regulatory framework. Chapter 3734 of the Ohio Revised Code considers composting as a solid waste disposal option and puts Ohio EPA in charge of developing regulations for the permitting and operation of these facilities. As well, it charges the agency with developing quality standards that will qualify compost as a product appropriate for use in agricultural and horticultural applications. The state law also charges the Department of Agriculture with regulating on-farm composting of farm animal mortalities and other on-farm composting activities when exempted from Ohio EPA's composting regulations. But for this presentation, I will be focusing on Ohio EPA's regulatory role. Also want to let you know that Ohio EPA's composting regulations are found in Chapter 3745-560 of the Ohio Administrative Code. And there are rules in other chapters that also apply. For example, definitions that apply to the composting rules and other solid waste programs are found in the Multi-Programs Rules, Chapter 3745-500. And the licensing and the chapters for the licensing and financial assurance rules apply to some composting facilities, as I will explain later. As I just mentioned, Ohio EPA is required to regulate composting as a solid waste disposal method. And composting is different from disposal at landfills and from incineration in that composting results in a useful and beneficial material. Also, composting could be seen as a recycling activity. I think that the best way to understand the approach and content of the composting regulations is by understanding how composting and compost are defined for regulatory purposes. I'm sure that most of you have seen various definitions of what compost and composting is. And scientifically, all those definitions are correct. However, when it comes to regulating as a disposal method, we need definitions that clarify expectations while providing some flexibility to accommodate changes in the industry. So let's see how high APA define composting. It means the process of biological decomposition of solid waste under controlled conditions resulting in compost. Control conditions include, but are not limited to, grinding, shredding, chipping, mixing feedstocks, bulking agents and additives, piling, physical turning, aerating, adding moisture, performing procedures to achieve human pathogen reduction, and other processing of solid waste. I want you to notice that the definition in turn define what are controlling conditions, and I want you to especially notice the ones highlighted in blue. These are important because they differentiate composting from just recycling wood by chipping it. We will refer back to this aspect of the composting definition when discussing exemptions to the rule. Also, I bet that many of you noticed right away that the definition doesn't mention that it is an aerobic process, nor makes mention of the high temperatures typical of active composting. It is not that maintaining aerobic conditions and high temperatures is not important. The rules addresses those issues in other ways, as we will see later. But by not specifying that it must be aerobic, we provide flexibility for innovative methods that may use anaerobic steps. Also, high temperatures, while they are hallmark of highly active composting, composting could be managed to occur at lower temperatures and longer times. And some facilities may want to use this approach. A well-managed low-temperature approach doesn't present any additional environmental risk, so we don't see a reason why we should prohibit it from being used. And as the definition says, composting results in compost. So let's see now how compost is defined. This is Ohio Regulatory's definition of compost. Compost means a humus-like organic material resulting from the biological decomposition of solid waste. It is a straightforward definition. It focuses on the fact that it resulted from solid waste and that can accommodate various qualities and uses that compost may have. If you search online for photos of compost, a photo like this one is what probably will show up first. This is what most of us think of as compost, as a finished, mature, stable compost, meaning that the microbes and other decomposers are done extracting energy from the material. So let's look a little deeper into what can be considered compost according to this definition. A common measurement used to define what is compost is maturity, which is an index of the stability of the nitrogen and carbon contents in the materials used in the mix. The picture to the left shows the maturity index for the Solvita maturity testing kit. And the index above 6 will be considered an optimum maturity and what some might call a true compost. Now, the picture to the left shows various composts that were considered ready for use at various facilities I have visited. You can see that the wide range of appearance. And very likely also a variation in maturity. I do not know the maturity values for any of these composts, but I will expect that the bottom 3 are at 6 or above. The ones in the middle are likely in the advanced composting and begin curing range, which is the lime green in the Solvita chart. And the top 3 are in the active composting stage, which is the orange in the Solvita chart. So, why this wide range in appearance? Well, it has to do with the materials used as bulking agents, mainly. For example, the ones at the top contain some food waste, but the one to the left use mainly straw as bulking agent. The one in the middle use wood chips and bark, and the right one use only leaves. So are all of these acceptable as compost? Yes. And that is because it depends on the intended use. If it will be used as ornamental garden mulch, you might want to compost with larger pieces. For a vegetable garden or for potting media mixes, you might want to compost that is more granular and mature. So in fact, the composting regulations do not specify how mature the compost has to be because there are appropriate agricultural and horticultural uses for compost that are below 6 in the maturity index. And also because we don't want to limit the range of products that a facility can produce and market. So what about mulch? I'm sure many of you are thinking, what about mulching facilities? So first of all, I want to clarify that mulching is the act of placing mulch. It's not just it's not producing mulch. And as you see in these pictures, even non-organic materials can be used as mulch, and even grass clippings and leaves can be used as mulch without being composted previously. Ohio EPA has not defined mulch so far because compost of any material can be used as mulch. We think that we can regulate the quality of the compost used as mulch without having to define what mulch is, which could also complicate things for the landscaping industry in Ohio. Now, there are facilities that take wood pallets and other whole woods to make mulch. And in the next section, I'm going to discuss which facilities are not considered as composting facilities or are excluded from part of the regulations, which includes how the rules address the facilities that just make recycled wood mulch product. The rules clarify that the recycling of wood is not considered as composting and is not subject to the rules when the recycling happens in the following manner. First, it says that the recycling must be limited to grinding, shredding, and chipping in order not to be considered as composting. Remember the items highlighted in blues in the definition of composting? So here's where they make an important difference. So letting a pile of fresh wood chips age or season for a few months so they don't absorb the nitrogen from the soil is an acceptable practice. But if the facility starts moving, adding water, or doing anything that would purposely accelerate the decomposition, then it will be considered as a composting activity. Also notice that the exclusion is specific as to what type of wood qualifies for wood recycling. So branches that still have leaves attached are acceptable, but loads consisting of just leaves are not. So very important is that this exclusion doesn't say just yard waste. Yard waste is more than 3 limbs, branches, stumps, and bark. Now, clean untreated wood is also defined in our rules, and that means source separated wood, including but not limited to sawdust, pallet, and dimensional lumber that has not been treated chemically or with adhesives and coatings, included but not limited to paint, glue, and any other visible contaminants. So this wood recycling exclusion typically applies to facilities that produce wood mulch or wood chips for boilers too. Another exclusion that I want you to be aware is the vermiculture exclusion. The rules recognize vermicomposting as a method for disposal of solid waste. However, we wanted to clarify that there is a difference between a facility which sole purpose is worm husbandry and is just using waste as feed, and a facility which purpose is to convert waste into a vermicompost product. Vermiculture operations typically raise worms to be sold to vermicomposter, but this exclusion also applies to the raising of any worms for any purpose, such as night crawlers for bait. Of course, some vermicompost will be produced, that's inevitable, but they are expected to not compete with regulated vermicomposter and instead use it on their own property. Mm-hmm. The 500 square feet exclusion applies to anyone composting the materials listed here in a total area no larger than 500 square feet, and as long as they do not cause nuisances or contamination. This exemption was added to accommodate and incentivize organic waste recycling at a small scale. It is widely used by community gardens, schools, startup food scraps composters, and many others. An important aspect of this exclusion is that the waste can come from any source, and the compost produced can be used anywhere, by anyone, and also testing is not required. We do recommend testing, but it is not required. Another thing that is very important is that while Ohio EPA considers composting of animal manures and food scraps under 500 square feet as being a very minimal risk, your local zoning regulations might be more specific as to where you can accept all of these materials. So we strongly encourage you to check your local zoning ordinances before starting composting using this exclusion. Another very useful exclusion is the restricted yard waste composting facility exclusion. And this one includes any business or organization doing their own landscaping, such as a university campus, a hotel, a cemetery, park, and also landscaping businesses that remove yard waste as part of their service. And then they want to compost the material themselves instead of taking it to a composting facility. However, they do have to meet these requirements. It has to be no larger than 2,500 square feet. They have to compost on their own property, use the compost on site, and cause no nuisances and surface and groundwater pollution. I want to add that if a landscaper also has a plant nursery and want to use their compost in the potting media, that will be considered as on-site use. The intention here is that they do not produce compost and market it, competing with facilities that are complying with the full regulations. The agricultural operation exclusion is another important one. This exclusion is intended to incentivize agricultural operations to take advantage of the organic waste they generate, to replace synthetic fertilizer and animal bedding also. An agricultural operation includes an operational agreement among farmers. For example, the farmer that grows the feed for livestock owned by another farmer may accept the manure from the livestock to make compost to use on their fields. Now, if these facilities start accepting waste from sources outside the operation or want to sell their compost to someone outside the agricultural operation, they will no longer be exempted and will have to comply with the Ohio EPA composting rule. And there are 3 other exclusions that I will not go into much details. The residential backyard composting is not regulated under the composting rules. On-farm animal mortality composting is exempted because, as I said earlier, is regulated by ODA. However, if they want to distribute the compost outside their property, then they need to meet the quality standards established under high EPA regulations. So how this works is that ODA will require them to sample and test following the same Ohio EPA requirements that we will apply for someone that is composting animal mortalities outside of a farm. Now, the sewage sludge treatment is permitted by the Division of Surface Water under Chapter 61 of the Revised Code. Is exempted. So the composting of raw sewage sludge is always regulated under the biosolids rules. However, if someone other than the wastewater treatment facility that generated it wants to compost exceptional quality sludge or Class A sludge, they very likely will have to comply with the composting regulations. So let's take a little break and take a quick poll. So I have this question for you. Which composting scenario may not be excluded from permitting as a composting facility? School composting food scraps in an area under 500 feet. Park composting the yard waste in area under 2,500 square feet. A facility accepting yard waste from several municipalities. Backyard composting of residential waste, or a farm composting their own waste on their own property for their own use. So I will defer now to Leanne so she can set the poll for you.
All right, I'm going to launch the poll. Please select the appropriate response and click submit. It looks like about 70% of today's attendees have responded. If you haven't responded yet, go ahead, submit your response, and we will close the poll in a few moments. We are now closing the poll, and let me share the results with everyone.
Well, 82% of you got it correct. A facility accepting yard waste from several municipalities will not be excluded for permitting. Unless they were like under 500 square feet, but most likely because they're taking food yard waste from many municipalities, they will have to be larger than that. Good job, everyone. So let's get moving with the next part of the presentation. I want to talk now about what is the next step once you determine that the composting regulations apply to your project, your activities, or your business. The rules classify composting facilities according to the waste materials that they are allowed to accept. So there are 4 classes of facilities, and as you move from class 1 to class 4, the more limited the type of waste that can be accepted. A class 1 can accept pretty much everything, including the household trash that you will otherwise send to a landfill. I know that's surprising, right? But this set of facilities became very popular in the late 80s as a way to reduce the volume of the waste prior to landfilling in order to save landfill space. Now, in Ohio, any compost that was produced with MSW will have to be disposed of at a landfill. It cannot be distributed. We only had one of these facilities in the state, and it actually closed back in 2015. Class 2 facilities can take everything listed except MSW or municipal solid waste. A class 3 can take everything a class 2 can except for food waste. And a class 4 can take everything a class 3 can except for animal waste. Alternative materials require a site-specific approval by the director, and there are some limits as to what each facility class may request for approval. Also, because we don't have any class 1 facilities in the state, for the rest of the presentation, I will be mostly concentrating in the other 3 classes. The types of materials that are allowed at each class determine the level of risk for each class, and in turn, determine the level of permitting that we require. A class 4 only requires a registration with Ohio EPA. There is no cost for registration, and they do not need to be renewed. You only need to submit a modification or amendment if any of the information in the registration changes. A class 3 is also a registration. However, it has a size limit. A facility, the materials placement area cannot be larger than 135,000 square feet, or about 3 acres. The reason is to limit the pathogen risk from accepting animal waste without requiring these facilities to get a license to operate or having to establish a financial assurance fund. And with Class 2, requires a registration, a license to operate, and a financial assurance. And when we had a Class 1, that facility did require a permit to install, which is a very similar permit as what a landfill will have to submit to us. Okay, so now that you know which kind of facility you need to register as, this is what is in a registration. This is the bulk of the information required. You need to provide us with business information, owner and operator information, location. If you have a Class 2, what is the closure cost estimate, which is used to determine the financial assurance, and the seating criteria compliance certification statement. As part of that, you need to provide us with a plan view drawing, a calculation of the maximum capacity for which the facility was designed, letters, copies of the letters of intent, and if applicable, copies of letter of consent. The main purpose of a registration is to demonstrate that you meet siting criteria and that the facility is prepared to accept waste materials and operate. Now, the registration is submitted online through our e-business center, but we also have printable forms available as needed. Now, once you submit the registration prior to approving it, Ohio EPA will conduct a site visit to check if the facility was reasonably prepared according to this design and construction performance standard. We want to make sure that you have a slope to help divert surface water, that you can prevent runoff, the facility is built in a way that prevent excessive ponding and erosion, that you can minimize the potential impact to surface and groundwater, that you can collect and contain leachate, that the facility can reasonably be operated during inclement weather, and that the equipment and vehicles needed can pass through the roads of the facilities, and also that you have posted the appropriate signage. These are performance standards, and most of them are based on stormwater and wastewater management (BMPs). And we did that in order to give facilities a leg up towards complying with future or potential surface water requirements. I'm going to take another quick break here, and we're going to do another poll. So this is the second question. Establishing a Class 2 facility requires which of the following from Ohio EPA? A registration, a license to operate, financial assurance, zoning clearance. Leanne, now I defer to you again.
All right, I have launched the poll. Please select all that apply and submit. It looks like over half of today's attendees have responded. If you haven't responded yet, go ahead and submit your response, and we will close the poll in a few moments. Okay, I am closing the poll and I will share the results with everyone.
Okay. Well, this is a little tricky question because it's requirement from Ohio EPA. So the correct answers are registration, license to operate, and financial assurance. Yes, you do need a zoning clearance, but you do not obtain that from Ohio EPA. You obtain it from the local municipality, which might be township, county, or city. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So let's keep going. Yeah. So for the next few slides, I'm going to cover key operational rule requirements, which are the ones that I consider need attention every day at the facility or everyday facilities operating. Not that the other requirements are not important, they are, but you might encounter those less frequently. So, the composting rules specify which processing methods or composting method can be used. So a facility may use one of these approved methods of composting or waste conditioning. A conditioning method is a method used to prepare the waste for easier composting. For example, here, acidic anaerobic fermentation is a scientific description for bokashi that many of you may have heard. And this is an anaerobic process carried out by yeast and that doesn't produce methane. And it is intended to break down the lignin and other fiber molecules from plant cell walls. So it is compost faster. You see that each one says other upon approval. And this is the mechanism that we use to take advantage of the flexibility built into the definition of composting by not specifying that it must be aerobic or that it must occur at high temperatures. The rules require that you operate in a way that you prevent these problems from happening and that you can promptly manage them if they happen. For example, the rule requires you to control noise, dust, and odors, control the attraction, breeding, and emergence of vectors, prevent the occurrence and spread of fire, and if they happen, that you extinguish them as quickly as possible, and that you collect, properly contain, and dispose of scattered litter. That this usually happens because some people put other materials, other non-compostable materials in with yard waste or other compostables, and that you also operate in a way that you prevent the creation of water and air pollution. The rule do not prescribe how you achieve this, as each facility is different, and also the equipment that you may have available or they may have available is different too. So you determine how you're going to achieve these goals, these requirements. The operators is expected to maintain access roads to allow facility operations at all times. Some temporary ponding of water after a rain event can be okay. But when we have algae growing, as you may see in this photo, it is clear to us that access has not been maintained for quite a while. You will notice that surface water and leachate management is a very important aspect of composting facilities operations. You want to operate to manage surface water in accordance with surface water regulations that are in Chapter 6111 of the Revised Code. Also operate in a way to minimize runoff from coming into the facility, to correct conditions causing erosion or ponding, divert surface water away from the materials placement area or for where the wastes are, maintain the slope, and maintain any structures for the collection or containment of runoff, and monitor surface water runoff and groundwater if you are required to do so. Again, the rules establish performance standards for the management of surface water, And here the goal is to manage surface water to minimize the formation of leachate and wastewater as much as possible, because these will have more stringent requirements under the surface water regulations. Of course, we also specify the management of leachate. And a facility would always have some wastewater and leachate. But once you minimize its production, you're expected to manage it. So please take a quick read at these items listed to minimize the control or eliminate the conditions leading to leachate, minimize the ponding of leachate, eliminate the conditions that generate leachate. As you can see, these are also performance standards for prevention, minimization, and management. Now, the requirement to collect and contain leachate within the facility boundaries is a high priority one, and it's one that we really want you to consider when doing this, the steps for designing and constructing the facility. That would be the best time to have all these considerations. It will save you a lot of money. Class 2 facilities that accept food scraps also have to meet these additional requirements, especially if they are dumping the incoming food scraps onto the ground and in open air. To close today's presentation, let's talk about compost product quality. We had rules about composting distribution for each facility class. And for class 1s, 2s, and 3s, there is a rule for testing and sampling requirements and a rule with the quality standards specifying what to test for and what analytical methods to use. Compost distribution. So let's talk when you can distribute compost for a class 2 and a class 3. Now, a very important distinction to make is that compost and compost product have different definitions. Compost product is compost that meets the quality standard. And only compost product can be distributed outside of the facility. All compost produced at a class 2 and 3 must be tested and verified to be a compost product before distribution. Testing is not based on a frequency schedule or volume produced. All compost must be tested. However, the rule does allow you to consolidate compost piles up to a maximum of 10,000 cubic yards and then sample from that single pile. So this certainly will reduce the number of samples and reduce the cost of sampling. Another important thing to be aware of is that if the owner of the facility is using all compost on their own property, then they are not required to test. Again, it is recommended but not required. However, you do have to provide us in the annual report the locations, the addresses of the properties where you use the compost, so we can verify that you did comply with this requirement. Class 4 facilities are not required to test their compost. And that is because we consider that as long as a facility composted their material in compliance with the rules, all their compost are considered a compost product, regardless of the level of maturity of the compost. Okay, let's take one final poll. So after everything that you have heard in this presentation, What is your opinion about composting as a solid waste disposal method? Easy to do without much training, easy to do when you have been trained, difficult if you don't have training, difficult even if you have proper training, or just not too easy but not too hard either. Leanne,
All
can you
right.
please the poll?
I have launched the poll. Please select your response and click submit. We're still seeing responses coming in. For those of you who have not responded, go ahead and submit your response and we'll close the poll in a few moments. All right, we are closing the poll and let me share the results.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing your opinion. There's really not a wrong or correct answer to this, and we just wanted to see what you thought. I do think that it's easy to do when you have been trained. It can be. It doesn't necessarily is too hard, but it is a lot easier if you have some trainer. Thank you everyone for making it to the end of my presentation. I believe we have now time for questions. And the questions will be moderated.
All right. Thank you, Angel. So as Angel said, we are now going to answer questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the question pane. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. If we don't answer your question during the Q&A portion, we will reach out to you by email following today's session. So with that, the first question is, if a municipality is only collecting yard waste from residents and then have a company come once a year, grind the yard waste, and take it away to a composting facility, does that municipality need to register their collection location as a compost facility?
Um, Not necessarily. Now, usually a facility like that, if they're just collecting and consolidating yard waste to then send to a composting facility, it qualifies as a yard waste only transfer facility under the transfer facility regulations. That also a whole chapter for that. And there's actually a rule that specify what they need to comply for, and they are exempted from like permitting and licensing as a transfer facility, as long as they only accept yard waste, and that they put a sign specifying that they're a transfer facility only for yard waste and phone numbers for an emergency, and also they do not cause any water pollution, air pollution. So those municipalities had that option. I can tell you that we had a few municipalities that used to compost themselves and now are pretty much operating like that. But they had kept the registration only because they don't know if in the future they want to do another contract like that, or they want to start composting themselves. So kind of for as a backup in case their budget doesn't allow them to contract someone to come and pick it up, they want to have already a site specified and dedicated to that. And we are fine if they want to stay registered. However, that also means that they have to comply with the regulations.
Okay. So we have another question. Where can a composting facility have their compost tested, and is there a cost with that?
Yes, so Ohio EPA doesn't certify laboratories for testing compost. What operators are expected to do is look for a soil testing lab or an environmental lab. The large majority of these labs will be able to provide testing for compost. We do strongly recommend that you contact the lab to get a quote, that you provide them a copy of the quality standards rule. As I mentioned earlier, we have a rule that lists what are the tests that need to be done and the methods. And we put it separately like that, so it's easier for you to just email that PDF or send them the link to that and ask them to tell you a quote for just that. And that is because sometimes farmers that are not regulated by us, they also want to test compost, but they do not test for everything. Their purpose is a little bit different. So a facility, a laboratory say, yeah, we test compost, but they might test for you, give you a quote and do the test as if you were going just to land apply on your own farm instead of you trying to make a product to sell to the public. The cost can range, depends on the labs. I've seen, several years ago, we asked for a few quotes just to have an idea, and we got quotes back ranging from about 300 to just over 600. I cannot tell you exactly why it varies so much, but that's a reason to check on the labs around and get quotes from several of them.
Okay. Next question. How many registered composting facilities do we have in Ohio?
Okay. In total, right now we have about 310. We always have maybe one being the registers, a few ones coming up. But of those 310, right now we believe about 28 are class 2 facilities. Between 50 and 60s are class 3, and the rest are class 4.
Okay. I have another one. Do class 4 facilities require a certified operator? And if so, is there a specific certified operator training they should be taking?
Okay. So technically, all of our facilities should have a certified operator. If you look at our rules, it said that you have to have a certified operator. The issue is that certification program has to be established by Ohio EPA. And in all this year, we haven't been able to establish one. We're actually working on a program on regulations to establish what should be the content on an operator training that we can certify. However, there are many other trainings out there that, for example, Ohio State University at the Worcester campus, they do operator training every year. We actually funded the development of that one. The U.S. Composting Council also provides some training, and they do have a national operator certification program, which is more extensive than what we have been offering in the state. But there are a lot of the solid waste management districts and soil and water conservation district do some composting training. While those are probably or mostly directed towards backyard composting, if you are new to this and you want to start getting some knowledge, those are great because the knowledge is the same, the practice is the same, it's just at a larger scale. The scale is what is different. But if you attend one of those, that will help you a lot. And there's also several good books out there. We hope to have a pre-certification program between the next 2 years. We have draft rules that we hope to share with the public soon to get some feedback and then collaborate with other providers for these trainings. Thank you for the question.
Okay, and we will do one more question right now, and that is, if you give wood chips only away to your residents, do they need to be tested? The person asking this stated their compost, which is leaves, is hauled out every 2 to 3 years, log piles every year.
Tested? No, you should not test it. I think the question might be if they need to be registered or not. I mean, because if they would be considered yard waste and you only managing yard waste and you're at a class 4, you do not have to test. The wood chip, if you consider the wood chips to be the product you want, that would be acceptable for distribution. If there's more additional information or details that you want to consider, please send us a message, send me a message, and I will be glad to talk with you in more detail and make sure that I provided you the right guidance.
Okay. Well, thank you, Angel, for the great presentation, and thank you, everyone, for attending this 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference session. Before we end the session today, we would like to point your attention to another one of today's environmental fun facts. Ohio EPA's Recycling and Litter Prevention Grant Program supports communities, nonprofits, businesses, and academic institutions to initiate or expand recycling programs, encourage sustainable practices, stimulate economic growth, and support litter prevention efforts through 4 different grants. This grant program covers equipment for composting operations like the ones we covered today. Grants are awarded on an annual basis, and the 2023 cycle opens on November 7th. You can scan the QR code with your smartphone that's on this slide to get more information about the grant program and how to apply. Ohio EPA hosts a series of webinars throughout the year on a variety of environmental topics. The slide provides information on how to register for these upcoming webinars, where to find recordings of previous webinars, and how to sign up to receive notifications of upcoming webinars through Ohio EPA's Customer Support Center. And with that, we will end this session of the 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference. We hope you are able to join us for other conference sessions. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.